the supply chain and interdependency between certain countries, particularly the United States and China, will be relooked at, particularly because of lack of trust. And because of this lack of trust, certain economies may benefit from such distrust, such as India and Vietnam. So for India and Vietnam, they would have to look at new areas, identify new industries, adopt the right strategies to take advantage of the position they will be in the event that the US and China continue to have their trade fight. So in terms of the labor skill for the labor force, there will be different type of training to be emphasized. And likewise, the IT industry will expand more rapidly, particularly like, Amazon may be making use, companies like Amazon, offline shopping will be able to progress more rapidly. So a whole new scenario will be the picture in the next 2 to 3 years, I would say.
Thank you so much for your initial comments. Ramesh, can you come in over here? Cheetang had put in the global perspective in extremely well, if you want to add to that.
Yes. So I'm in Sri Lanka, where we had a first wave, and since then we have almost no cases at community level for the last 3 to 4 months. And so I'm actually speaking from what is essentially a post-COVID economic situation as far as the country is concerned. Now, Cheetang has given us a very good global perspective, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happened on the ground in Sri Lanka. So we have certain industries that are completely hit by COVID, and in the post-COVID era, they're still to recover. We have been fortunate that it's an island, so the borders are naturally closed in many ways. The airports remain closed to general traffic and tourists, so we do have COVID restrictions. So what has happened? Tourist hotels and the tourist industry has been hit. But I really believe in every crisis, there's also opportunity. So you have the 400-room Shangri-La Hotel in Hambantota, which is in the south of the country, being a 100% quarantine hotel. And so you have it with many hotels where people returning to the country can either opt to go into government quarantine centers provided free of charge, or into a hotel quarantine, which is at a flat rate. And many hotels along the coastline are now 100% occupied because of the quarantine facilities offered. So there is an opportunity. They're covering more than their costs. In fact, they're having 100% occupancy in the off-season, albeit at reduced prices. We've seen in several sectors, education for one, a boom in online education. I'm also on the council of a seminary which switched for one entire term. They moved all their courses online, and they found that people who would never come to the seminary, both from the city, from the country, and from overseas, participating in courses run by the seminary. So there are opportunities to be seen. We've seen in Sri Lanka, where internet usage is fairly high, we've seen exponential growth in purchasing online. For example, in the first couple of months, the main, what we call supermarket chains, which sell all manner of goods, mainly food, we saw their websites crashing. So there is a silver lining in every dark cloud. But yes, there is going to be loss of jobs in certain sectors. Yes, there is going to be a GDP fall. Depending on whom you listen to, Sri Lanka would end the year with a plus or minus 1%, either a growth positively or negative of 1%. Not a huge impact. And they can't seem to agree whether it will be positive or not. Some sectors like garment manufacturing has been able to quickly switch to manufacture of PPE, and huge orders and huge shipments. Air freight, hugely successful right now. So there is a lot of positives in the whole of this COVID environment. And I think there will be a repositioning on which sectors will work and which won't.
Thank you for sharing Islands of Hope quite literally at this point of time. Shubheksha, any initial thoughts on this question?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we all have different perspectives to it, definitely, and all that we come from different phases of life. We have different countries are dealing with it differently, and different localities even are dealing with it differently. But then, what I was as I was going through the question, yeah, people will need time to adjust to the new normal, but I think it will take quite a time for the economy to stabilize again. But I I'm very hopeful because looking at centuries back, or even at the Bible times, when we look at exiles or plagues, when we look at world wars, I think when that hit everyone, I think it was like the end for people. People were hopeless at that time, but then God always gives us opportunities to get back up, and though everyone suffers, it also reminded me of Elijah when he declared the 3-year reign. He also had to go through the drought himself. So us as Christians also need to go through. But I also saw it was a very good opportunity for all of us to come together, to pray, to reflect, to repent, and pray for different countries, different leaders. And it was a really, very significant moment for the global church to come together. And talking about the economy, it's an economic cycle. From what I've studied, I've not seen a whole life of everything that's gone by, but then we're going through a global recession, and in the upcoming years are definitely difficult, but let's be hopeful. As even Ramesh sir said, there is opportunities, and God will give us opportunities to grow more. And talking about what could be the new normal, especially for us as Christians, I think it's so much time that we've come together as fellowship. So many missed opportunities. We have gotten opportunities to get to know each other, right? So I'm very confident that God is doing new things in our lives, and also I think the new normal will be people who start saving more, and also being very thoughtful when investing, in a very financial way. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so basically, just a couple of thoughts that you had there. You spoke about hope. You took from where Ramesh had left. So, how do we find pockets of growth and encourage entrepreneurship in these dark times to enable those who have lost jobs to not lose hope? You're a young business person. You're a very influential youth voice in Nepal. People look up to you. So, what is the kind of advice that you would give to people in your country at this point of time, especially young people who are going through these tough times?
Yeah, okay. In these difficult times, a lot of stores, a lot of even multinational stores are closing down. And with everything, if one thing closes down, it's a gap that remains open. And I think, there is a gap to be filled in one way or the other. The gap has to be filled. So what I believe is, for people who persevere and who will persevere, they will survive. And for people, I know it is difficult. A lot of people are losing jobs, but then we believing in Jesus and having Him as our hope, we can, I think the Christian youth, with the light of Jesus and the hope of Jesus, we can go forward to people, and I think it's also a good opportunity for us to take the good news of Jesus out there. So besides that, I've seen a lot of even entrepreneurial ideas happening here in Nepal as well. We didn't have a lot of e-commerces going on, and now we were pushed towards it. Even if there was no governmental rule, we were forced to move into e-commerce way of lifestyle through online shopping and all. And there were a lot of on new upcoming booming new online stores coming up. So I think there is opportunities, and for people, it also pushes people to think more, the new trends or new ideas. And those who push to survive, I think they will make ways for other people to follow for survival in the end. There was an example I have. There was the startup companies of handicraft, of local handicraft companies, and 5 of them got together, they acknowledged each other. They started sharing their posts, and they reached out to a larger market in a whole. And I think post-COVID, they'll have a lot of market in their hands in the days to come. And one way or the other, people are looking into ways where they will survive, because that's what's required, right? But at the same time, for us as Christian youths, it's also time for us to reflect and listen to God and heed God's word, and what does He want to talk to us, and what does He want to follow us to. And I think, yeah, seeking first the kingdom of God, and everything else will follow. Yeah, that's what I'd want to say in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for also bringing in perspective of Christian youth and Christian thoughts while you were talking about the economy. Cheating, if you can come in, because there's someone who's had a long corporate career, especially with a sector that was extremely badly impacted, which is aviation. Is this a wake-up call for some sectors that depend a lot on social interaction, such as restaurants, travel, tourism? Can technology help some of these sectors face these challenges without losing the essential human connect that drives these very sectors? Cheating, any thoughts? Cheating, you're on mute.
Sorry, my apologies. If you look at the service industry, it is one of the worst affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And many airlines are retrenching their employees. When the airlines do not bring in tourists, the hotels, the restaurants, and the other tourism establishments will definitely face financial difficulties. So, the airline without business will encounter cash flow problem, because their equipment will be parked idle, and they have to maintain it according to the regulatory and safety requirements of the regulatory authorities. I mean, to name a few airlines, Virgin Airlines, Qantas, AirAsia, Cathay Pacific, Singapore Airlines, they are all bleeding, and they are all exploring other means to generate income. Some have ventured into the food business, making use of the catering kitchen, uh, or operating flights to nowhere. But these are all temporary measures to improve the cash flow. The other industry, tourism affected industry like Disneyland uh, and other amusement center, they also had to lay off employees, um, thousands of employees. We are not talking about 1 or 2,000, but we are talking about thousands. And likewise, the casino, which is uh, uh, being adversely affected. Of course, those hotels um, with a stronger cash flow reserves have taken advantage of the current situation to renovate and and upgrade their facility to better place themselves to compete when the economy improves. So it will take about 2 or 3 years for the tourism industry to recover to a prior pandemic level. Now, therefore, to answer the question directly, that is that to what extent the employees um, can adapt, or the employees which have been laid off by the airlines or by the hotels can adopt to a new way of finding work. The airlines and the hotels, they adopt the skills, IT skills, uh, which is usually the most up to date. So therefore, it is very difficult for them, to sort of adjust further. I would say, because whatever they have acquired from the job skill from an IT perspective are usually the most up to date. So there is not much room for them to adopt in order to survive, but they will just have to continue to make use of their present skill and and see when the opportunity arises. So that's all, Vijay. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheeting. I'll come back to you on a couple of those points, but in the
Okay.
interest of time, let me just move to Ramesh and get his thoughts on another question. We are talking to a group of South Asian Christian youths. In this mood of despondency where all seems lost, what can the church and Christians in South Asia do to help those impacted by the pandemic within our community and beyond? As in, what is it that we can do?
So, Bijoy, for me, as I said at the beginning, there's a silver lining in every dark cloud. And certainly for the church, this is a golden opportunity, because when you have hope, and from a marketing perspective, I spent some time in marketing. From a marketing perspective, when you are selling hope, you need despondency, right? If everyone's already got hope, they're not buying from you. And it's been a great opportunity for the church to be seen as Christ extended. It's been an opportunity to reach out across sectors, across communities, across even the non-Christians, just as the Bible says, putting your bread on the water, because you can see the need. It's there right before you. It's not about trying to make converts. It's about trying to be that hand of Christ extended. And that opportunity is an amazing opportunity. Apart from that, you've had so many people using the lockdown time to start producing messages of hope, which have been an encouragement to so many, because in many philosophies, everything is in your own hands. Unlike in the Christian philosophy, where you don't depend on your own strength and your own power, but you depend on the grace that flows from a greater power. And it's a mindset change for some who have not even heard that message of hope. And I know of many people who actually, sometimes even lay people, who recorded little 2-minute, 3-minute clips and put it out there. So on the one hand, there's the actual social activism, the helping the widow, the orphan, the needy, the hungry, providing the social net in environments which don't have the dole. Developed countries, you just go up to the labor office, you sign up for dole and you get a check every week. In this part of the world, that's not so prevalent. So as you said, people are struggling, especially in urban areas, to just exist. The church has a huge opportunity. And I have seen in Sri Lanka, the church reaching out, even without the funds available. They've reached out in faith. They've reached out digging into reserves, because it's a mandate to reach out to people in trouble. I know James reminds us, it's not just good enough to say, oh, I'll pray for you, brother, or I'll pray for you, sister. Meet them in their point of hunger, or clothe them if they need clothing. And so the church was active even when Sri Lanka had complete curfew. They were able to get curfew passes because they do humanitarian work. They did a lot more humanitarian work than the government, in the sense that they were able to respond fast. They've been there, they've done that, they've done flood relief, they've done tsunami relief, and this was just another relief effort where they sprang into action. Irrespective of what your religious leaning was, they helped you out. So it was an amazing time of actually reaching out and building relationships. And then comes the message of hope that you have. So I don't think it's a time of despondency. It's a time of despondency only for those who do not have hope. For the Christian, you have hope and you're marketing hope. You're selling hope in a sense. Pardon my use of the word selling, but you have the best thing for this time available to introduce people to. And it's been amazing here. I think the church has made huge inroads in a variety of things. It's had to look introspectively. They've been restricted in terms of functioning. Until last week, we could have only 50 at a service. But many churches, even the very traditional services started live streaming services. And so they have embraced technology. They've gone even further than one would have expected. People who are not from their church have been tuning in and watching, because they're so desperate for a message of encouragement, and encouragement comes through the word. And so it has been great. All is not lost. I think even in this COVID crisis, there's been huge opportunities in some sectors. We know that entrepreneurs have sprung up doing all manner of things, because with every void, with every closure, there is something else that opens up. And therefore, we have seen internet-based businesses or e-commerce just having geometric progression in this country. Virtual kitchens have sprung up, and we have people like the food delivery companies, and I'm not going to start mentioning our local brands, but food delivery companies just completely transforming the food and beverage landscape. And it has transformed it for good. And that's what you're seeing. So it's not all despondency. I think there's a lot that the church can do by in actually being that light in the darkness. And I look at it positively, not just as a clergyman, but as a Christian. I've seen over the last few months huge inroads that the church as a whole has made. And I actually thank God for the opportunity.
It's a very interesting way to put it, and the way you use language to do it is very interesting, because you use the term, forget the selling hope, but marketing hope. There's a market for hope where there is despondency, and this is a great time. So thank you so much. Those are very interesting thoughts to leave with our audience. Cheating, because we were talking about it earlier, I had to travel the last couple of weeks for, as I mentioned to you all earlier, for work, and I had to travel through various states. And there is one state in India which depends 100% on tourism, which is called Goa. And they are telling people, if you're going to work from home, don't work from home, come to Goa. That's their branding. So different sectors have used the opportunity, different people have used the opportunity differently. They're selling hope in some sense, because that's the right way to approach it. From that perspective, as a veteran of this industry, do you think your advice to a lot of the youth or the people who are in these sectors and who may be affected because in terms of livelihood, do you think reskilling or going back to education is the right advice to many of the people? Because their expertise may be in sectors that have low growth potential. So, for example, someone who was a cabin crew moving to corporate trainings, So, any thoughts on that, Cheating?
Yes, I think when you are in that sort of position, you have no choice but to look at how to equip yourself to be gainfully employed. Therefore, you will have to look at skills which you currently possess, which can help you to move into another job. And to move into another job is, let's say, for example, an airline employee which have been involved in yield management, which is a very highly skilled what they call job. Had to look at how to maximize or optimize the income for the airline selling seats. So when he uses that, if he can use that, reskill that to, let's say, hopefully move it into a vacancy, let's say a hotel vacancy or some other similar related, then that will improve his chances of being gainfully employed. So in other words, one shouldn't give up. One should continue to work hard to convince the potential employer that he or she will be capable of doing that job. It's just unfortunately that the airline industry is facing a very difficult time. Like today's, in Bloomberg, it was reported by Changi Airport, which is the best airport in the world. They are saying that they will have to continue to retrench employee because they do not anticipate the economy to improve within the next 2 years. So, and that is Changi Airport. What about UK? What about Heathrow Airport? What about Chalakot Airport in Hong Kong? So the reality is that COVID-19 makes it unsafe for people to travel on aircraft. So I would strongly urge the young people who have the ability to learn, they should acquire new skill, position themselves in a better position so that they could be gainfully employed.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. On that note, Shubheksha, because I think Ramesh actually touched upon it earlier, but European societies, developed countries have security nets where there is support, a lot more support from the government and from the, from the authorities for, people who are struggling in a pandemic like this. Do you think that South Asian countries, your country can use your local perspective, needs to provide better security nets, especially for the people in urban and rural areas who are poor, who are affected in case of pandemic? The answer is obviously yes, but in terms of what they can do, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, the answer is definitely a yes. And as you said, the European system or the Western system, they're more systematic, or even Singapore, for example. But then here in South Asian countries, especially in Nepal, it is going towards, it is trying to it's just trying to have the security system, but I think it's a long way to go still. But still, having said that, there is definitely need for security nets, and it's also about what the privileged people can do, or what people who can provide can do for the society. About rural lives, people came back, especially the foreign employment workers. They came back, and I think they settled quite well in their villages, though there was loss of jobs and everything. But then the lifestyle was pretty different. But then for the people who were in the urban areas, with the expense being so high, it was very, very difficult, especially the ones who were staying on rent and they were taken out of their houses and they didn't have places to go or eat. But then at the same time, it also gave the youth, the Nepalese youth, or the youth around, an opportunity to get together, know more about the political system. Now the youth is no more interested in the political system, and that's something that's good for us as Nepalese here, because Nepalese, we don't want to mess with the politics system because it's pretty messed up. But then the youth started voicing out, and they started having these feeding campaigns where they would feed about 300, 400 people at the same time in different places in Nepal, in Kathmandu, and they would get funds, and people would send them funds. So directly or indirectly, people were impacting lives in a way. And I think even as Chi Ting sir said, about people trying to learn new things, I think there is scope for vocational trainings and vocational aspects where people can learn new things. And because there is going to be a lot of gaps created, and at the same time, there's a lot of new businesses, e-commerce businesses booming up. I think there will be opportunities for people to come in and get employment in some time, though it will be difficult, but I still think there is opportunities. For example, let's say a cleaning, we don't really have cleaning organization where cleaning, what they do is they hire cleaners, right? But then people who can come from foreign employment workers, they can come in and they can acquire more, or even, they also might have some expertise that they can put it into work. I think that's also something that we can look into. And at the same time, when we're also talking about, the poor and difficult, my mind also directed towards who were mentally challenged, and appreciate this network to reach out to this. I also got an opportunity to look at the last program, the webinar, where they talked about mental challenges. And it was a very good aspect to reach out to. And also I think we can also reach out to at this moment about spiritual poverty, which we as Christians need to move out there, spread the word of hope. And not because we are perfect, like Paul says, not because we are perfect, but then we are heading towards something that God has kept for us, than for what God has held us for. So yeah, I think there is a lot of message of hope that we as Christians can bring forth to the society. Thank you.
Thanks, Shubheksha. Ramesh, you kind of touched upon it earlier, but let me just ask you specific questions on which are the sectors that you see post this period. You can cite examples, but any specific sectors, for example, financial services, for example, some other industries where you see opportunities of growth post this pandemic? And as someone who's both a financial services marketing expert, but also a Christian, what is the message of hope that you have for people who are maybe not in these sectors, but looking at employment in these areas?
So I'm in that fortunate position where, as I said earlier, and we try to use the word marketing. So we're marketing hope. So I'm in the business of marketing spiritual hope in the form of Jesus Christ. But my day job is marketing financial hope in the form of life insurance. And what better marketing tool for life insurance than to have a life-threatening event happening around the world where there seems to be no cure and no real protection. The famed security forces of the United States couldn't prevent Donald Trump getting the virus. So it's an amazing opportunity in the sense that people become aware of the frailty of life. Earlier, we were talking about safety nets and such things. And what you realize is that all of those things that you put your trust in also get shaken. And yes, you are looking for safer havens. People are moving money into gold and such things when you want to stack it up. But the reality is you also realize I could be gone tomorrow, and what's the point in all of this? So some have actually changed their outlook on what one might have called, and bear in mind, I'm a strong capitalist. From the time that I was a student and working part-time, I've been capitalist. So I do believe the capitalists have a huge role in this, in actually bringing about that social change, rather than just treating capitalists as the bad guys. I think the whole system needs to be looked at. And there is a huge role the capitalists can play in bringing about resource allocation changes. So we talk about a safety net, but then Sri Lanka in particular has had for more than 60 or 70 years, 60 years, I think, free education across the country, free university across the country, free medical across the country. 95% of hospital beds in this country are government hospital beds. And now even the post-operative medications, if you need a stent, even the stent is provided by the state. What does that mean? It means that certain amount of resources are allocated for those things. And perhaps the time will come when you need to say, okay, do I need medical or do I need money to eat? Because what's the point in medical and education if I'm starving? So there will be a debate about resource allocation. And certainly in a time like this, certain industries have got wiped out. Recovery is going to be very slow on travel and tourism and several other affiliated, the smaller, less high-profile businesses. Airlines and things will survive or merge, or they will come back. These things pass. With all of these things, you find that it will pass. But what happens to the small guy who's got wiped out, or the guy who's jumping out of the window because he can't pay his debts? So what we have had very fortunately in Sri Lanka is the government has very quickly implemented moratoriums on debt repayment, concessions on rates of interest. For example, and this is a fact, I come from also a non-bank financial institution background. So a loan which would have cost you 24%, the government has now placed a cap of 10% as the maximum rate of interest. So those businesses are taking the hit to help the small man and the small business so that they can survive. I think it was Jack Ma who said very early on in the pandemic, he said for 2020, and I'm not sure if the quote is true, but it was attributed to him. He said for 2020, if you can look back and say, I survived 2020, you have done well. So businesses which had growth targets and ambitions had to just put that on hold. And very soon, now we're looking at October, the year is going to be over. If you have survived that, you've done well. Some industries have actually had huge opportunity in this. For example, in Sri Lanka, there was a lot of loosening of monetary controls at national level. That has meant that players in the bond market have had huge success. The stock market plunged when COVID came in and the lockdown came in. And since then, today, Sri Lanka actually has a positive growth, one of the only South Asian markets to have a positive growth. because the correction for COVID was so sharp. People also tightened their belts. I can tell you, in each of our businesses, we cut costs by 20 to 30%. And that is a permanent saving. You become more efficient. You've had releasing of space occupied because you're having work from home in certain areas. For example, our call centers have moved completely to work from home. So you're having numbers of staff, perhaps 30% not going to come back to work ever. They're still employed though. The lifestyle changes. They have 2 hours a day which they save because they're no longer traveling to and from work. They can engage in other creative things. They can attend webinars such as this. There's a lot of attendance, in fact, on all of the small groups and all that moved into online presence. The attendance just went skyrocketing. So there's always opportunities. And I think there's a lot that can happen. Things are settling down in many countries. Sri Lanka, I think it has settled already. Although the world has not settled, we are affected by it. But there is opportunity for things to go forward. I just think we need to adjust to the new norm of working. We need to adjust to the new norm of interactions and limited interactions. But we hope and pray a vaccine will come that will help the travel trade. At the moment, international travel is highly restricted. And that's very sad because many people are affected by that. But changes will come. I think the light at the end of the tunnel is visible.
Nice way to put it at the end over there. I'm requesting people, Jian has already put a message, but if anybody has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box. We'll be happy to take them. Our panelists are available. One last question, because I have both Ramesh and Cheeting with me, who are actually handling finances of the church itself. So this conversation came up when we were actually discussing the webinar with the panelists. Any thoughts on the church itself has done a lot in most countries in terms of trying to deal with the crisis, but in some places, because the services aren't available, because these churches itself aren't able to function the same way, the churches are struggling too. Ramesh, you had some thoughts on this. Cheeting, you're part of SACYN and you're the treasurer for SACYN. Cheeting, maybe you can take the first comment, and Ramesh, you can add to it.
Okay, I mean, from the Asia CMS context, when the pandemic first struck, our region, the Board of Trustees of Asia CMS decided that there must be something which we had to do immediately. We had to focus on what are the required demands, what are our priorities. And they decided that it is very important that India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Nepal be the region, or rather be the countries where we should devote a substantial amount of resources to help the needy. And it was decided that the first stage would have to be relief. In other words, that for the poor who were caught with no access to food and reserve. So our Board of Trustees have decided to set out, allocate about 200,000 ringgit, which is roughly about 40,000 US dollar, or rather 50,000 US dollar, to help in this area. And secondly is that after, the second stage, what is it that we should be involved in? We should be involved in the community recovery. What does it mean? So it means that we would have to mobilize to work with our MPs, in the respective region. There is that how we can help the affected people to equip themselves in a better job. Like in our region, we have a saying that if you give a person a fish, it only helps him to eat for that meal. But if you help the person to learn how to fish, you'll be able to help him to fish for the rest of his life, so he's able to earn a living. So from that perspective, there must be new skills acquired, and we Christians must see in what area we can play a more effective role. Our resources, of course, are limited, in terms of dollar and cents, in terms of human manpower, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. Asia CMS from that context have embarked on that sort of strategy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ramesh, any thoughts?
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of my roles is as chairman of the Incorporated Trustees. What we essentially do is we manage all of the cash reserves and endowments of the Church of Ceylon, which is the Anglican Church, as well as their property resources. So one of the things that, given my financial background and also my theological background, stewardship is an important aspect of it. And whether there was COVID or not, we had been working on a policy of trying to maximize returns from the assets that God has given us. Prudent investment, development of idle properties, because keeping bare land just for the sake of keeping it is tantamount to burying your talents in the ground and just letting it be. And so we're trying to put those things to work. COVID has made us focus a lot on it even more, because while, and I mentioned this earlier, while the church stepped up to do its social work and its COVID relief, the church itself has been severely affected. We're talking about tourism and travel. Local tourism has not been affected as much as the churches, because churches were closed completely for several months. But at the same time, clergy need to survive. They need to have their stipends. Staff need to be paid. The church can't be sending clergy home. That's not an option. Clergyman has a job for life. And so we've had to take measures to try and keep that ship afloat. So one of the things, as soon as COVID hit, was even the church, by April, we had cost-cutting measures. We had to look at the reality. We did a couple of scenarios as a church, as a diocese. I'm also involved in the diocese finance. And we had to, because sometimes Christians can be guilty of saying, oh, God will provide. But there is a certain, you have to do your part and God steps up and does his part. There is, and I'm not discounting faith in any of these things, but there's a responsibility on us to also be careful with the resources that we have. And so we looked at the period up to end June and then thereafter. So we made lots of cost-cutting efforts. We also realized that churches would not function and they didn't open until almost the end of June. Even then with restrictions. We have rural churches which have travel issues. They're not functioning as they should have. Quotas which have to be paid cannot be paid. And those are challenges that we have to face. So we then have those rural churches having communities, church communities, which are badly affected. And so we've been trying to focus on multiple level assistance as well as restoration, because there's the restoration that comes through getting people back on their feet, getting them back to work and such things. It's not easy. But as I said, Sri Lanka is fortunately one of the better placed nations. We are a small nation. COVID didn't really go out more than 3 out of the 24 districts. So the rural economies of agriculture and stuff have not been affected. In fact, they have flourished. So why do I say flourished? Because imports have been stalled on several sectors, which means that local agriculture had a better price for their produce. Local products, even manufacturing gets a better price now because they don't have the cheaper foreign alternative, because they, to conserve foreign exchange, completely stopped exports other than a few essential things. Just today we saw a very large pharmaceutical project being inaugurated. Why? Because they've encouraged local farmer and they're blocking foreign farmer. And so there is opportunity in that way. And the church has to be part of that growth, because everything is interlinked. The church doesn't stand alone. Its congregants come from industries that are affected favorably or unfavorably. And so we've had a challenge. I think the last seminar was about mental health. Just yesterday in my local church, we had a seminar or a retraining with the counselors. We have a counseling program ongoing, but just yesterday they had a retraining to focus specifically on people who are affected by the loneliness and despair coming in from this situation, which is a completely new situation. So I think the church has a lot to do in every area. The church is looking at its own finances. We have, in fact, specifically launched funds just to support the costs of the diocese, because churches are closed. People don't know the true situation. They need to be given the opportunity to support the church.
Thank you so much. Even as we speak, if you hear too much noise in my background, there's a proper thunderstorm that's broken out over Bombay as we speak. So any connectivity issues, if I have, Jian will step in. Shubheksha, there's a question in the chat box, but I don't want to ask it to you specifically, but I want to ask it to you as a youth member yourself. There are people who are facing job losses. There are people whose businesses have shut down. They are in deep financial crisis. Some of them have gone down the wrong path. They've gone into crime. They've gone into other things. Our friend Philip from Bangladesh has asked us this question. What would be the best way to help these kind of youth? How, maybe from your perspective, maybe from the church perspective, any thoughts that you have on, how we can help some of these people?
Yeah, I think one of a very good initiative is this webinar as well. I think, yes, the crime rates have gotten really bad. Even in Nepal, we have got a lot of crime incidents happening. But I think these happen because, people have a lot of time to think and waste. I think if you keep our minds occupied to something and they have something to do, I think these problems will gradually reduce. Like, for example, let's say, I think social media also it's also responsible to either influence in a good way or a bad way. And I think for us to share and even to organize webinars as such, because there are a lot of free programs happening all over the world, which people can have access to and to learn from. And if people take an opportunity to learn from them, I think it gives them time to think and process in a better way. But also, well, here in Nepal, just as people were losing jobs, we also saw job offers opening up, for specific, demanding specific expertise, or even for new upcoming, for new graduates, because with a less salary, but having something is better than having nothing, right? So even they got less salary or less
they're fresh, so you can train them in the skills they need.
Exactly. So there are opportunities as such. So I think we, as business organizations, I think we can encourage young people to invest their time into doing something better. I think that way maybe we can help in a societal way.
Cheating, there's a question from Uncle Solomon from Dubai. He's actually talking about travel, and he's based out of Dubai, which is one of the largest airport hubs and connectivity hubs. He's asking about world travel and what would be the scenario for world travel. We don't have a lot of time left, but if you could throw some thoughts in about what you think will be the post-pandemic scenario for world travel. And I'm sorry, that is actually the thunderstorm in my background over there.
I think my estimation is that the world travel, because of this COVID-19, unless and until we have it totally under control, we won't be able to recover it to the pre-pandemic level. Firstly, let's look at it in the context of a vaccine. If a vaccine is successfully tested, it has to go into production, it needs to be distributed, and it needs to vaccine the people all over the world. That would take 1 to 2 years to complete that process. So meanwhile, even before 100% vaccination is attained, uh, question is that to what extent could the travel pick up? Airlines, or rather put it this way, countries would not be prepared to accept tourists or travelers from another country which has not yet been able to control COVID-19. So so therefore, without that, then of course the travel industry would not be the tourist industry, the hotel industry, the resort industry would not be able to go back to its pre-pandemic level. So it would take a while. Secondly, is that you have to look at the region. Certain regions are more are richer, certain and have adopted the right, let's say, strategy. Then the comfort is there to allow tourists or travelers from that country. Very good example is Australia and New Zealand. They have done very well in controlling the COVID-19. The country which hasn't done well is the United States of America, the richest country in the world. And then now we are seeing a second wave in Europe. France, Spain is having a greater increase in the number of cases. So that, in my opinion, will affect how quick the travel industry pick up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheting. There's a question in the chat box, and I think I'll make it the last question, but I'm going to open it to all three of you here. I'll just take the last point because it sinks in with what we have been discussing throughout. And in some ways, we've answered this, but I want this to be the lasting thought that panelists leave with. Churches are closed. Believers are living with insecurity, many problems like joblessness, livelihood problems. How can church become a parachute and bring hope in this darkness and, give assurance that to people that there is a better life ahead? Shubhecha, let's start with you. After that, we'll go to Cheting, and then Ramesh can have the last word.
Yeah, I think it's the church has a good chance to be vessels of hope. And as we, being the temples of Christ, we carry the hope of Jesus along with us wherever we go, and it's an opportunity to shine the light that we have. And also when we preach the gospel, we take them, or we talk about the assurance that God gives us, and it's something that we've already experienced, so we can give an assurance, or we can be witnesses to his grace, and we can talk about God's grace and his faithfulness in our lives. And that, as I stated earlier also, when we seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else will follow, right? But I know it's pretty difficult, and we have seen difficult times in the Bible as well. So I think, in the church as a whole, it's a very good opportunity for us to bring messages of hope that God has put in our hearts, and for us as youths to heed to God's voice and to listen to him more closely. And when we just pray and believe in God, God will just direct us to go where we need to go, speak what we need to speak. And I think this is the message of hope that we can bring forth to the generations to come, or the people living in despair at the moment.
You think?
Yeah, my view is that I'm thinking only in the context of my church. What we, before the COVID-19 situation, we have worshippers, about 800 worshippers per week. But with the COVID-19, of course, initially all church services were suspended, and then later we did broadcast, and then now we have resumed. And with the resumption, we only have about 200 members worshiping with us in person every week. So when you have less person, in terms of financial resources, the um, tithes have been decreased. The offerings which we receive has also decreased substantially. In terms of fellowship, we are also not able to connect one another so effectively. In other words, to support one another other than through Zoom. Uh, so, in other words, we have to recognize that that we are not able to do things which we have been doing in the past because resources has been affected, circumstances have changed. But we should not give up hope. We should see how we can support those people who are in need of support. Like for us, we had to our church we had to dig on onto the reserve which have accumulated in the past. We contributed uh, funds to the medical team to buy PPE initially when the PPE there was a shortage of it. We also we are not able to visit our church members who have been hospitalized, but all we can do is to pray and encourage them, and particularly the youth, the people who have been unemployed or who have been retrenched as a result of COVID-19. So it is not an easy job. We have to rely on the grace of God. We have to continue to pray and to fight these challenges.
Thank you, Chetan. And Ramesh, just before you go, as we're talking about messages of hope, Dr. Manojan on the chat has shared about how their youth group is working in terms of conducting online streaming, counseling, so to help people during this time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing, Dr. Manoj. Ramesh, your last word.
So a lot of the issues that we talk about around us today are not new. They're just magnified, if I can say, or amplified because of a specific crisis. But the generic issues of anxiety caused by work issues or unemployment issues or financial debt and all of those things have been around for a long time. They're not new. They're part of what we call a developed society. The more we develop, the more we have these issues surfacing. Without trying to be judgmental, I feel that Christians in particular need to be, and I think Subacha touched on it, she said they will save more. But whether that is saving or whether that is exercising better judgment in the manner in which they get into debt traps, spending money you don't have, earning 1,000 but always spending 1,001. That is poor financial discipline. And I think this has taught us all a good lesson because many people find themselves exposed. Suddenly they have a fall in income and they cannot even take a fall in income because they're borrowed up to here. And therefore, just to keep those payments going, they can't afford a cut in any way. So these are challenges that existed before COVID. And now, as I said, they've just been magnified. The fact of the matter is, your joy is not defined by the multitude of your possessions or your status or your position. The source of joy is only one source. And that source, if you have it before COVID, you have it during COVID, you will have it after COVID. And I think that is the only hope that anybody has in facing day-to-day challenges. COVID will come, COVID will go. So what happens after COVID? What happens in 2021 when there's no more COVID, for example, and we hope there isn't? What happens then? Those issues will be there. Those challenges of day-to-day life will be there. And the question is, how do you face those challenges? If you think you can face any of those challenges, the challenge of a difficult boss or the challenge of a difficult child, your challenge of parenting a teenager, the challenge of getting on with a mother-in-law who's difficult. I make these mother-in-law jokes, I'm her favorite son-in-law. She only has one daughter. So that's an easy battle. But how do you face all of those? We're adding COVID to the equation, which makes it far worse today. But even without COVID, how do we face those? The only way is the hope that comes through Christ. that we can fix our eyes on him. We can look to him for guidance. We can look to him for peace. We can look to him for reconciliation. And I think all of those ingredients exist and existed before COVID. It exists during COVID, and it will exist after COVID. We have the problem, we have the solution. And I think we as a church, we as Christians need to bring that hope and that solution to everyone we come in contact with.
Thank you so much for those words. Thank you for constantly re-emphasizing hope, all three panelists, because this was a tough topic. When we decided to do it, when we discussed it, there was a lot of concern whether this is the right kind of topic for South Asian Christian Youth Network to be talking about, because why are we talking about financials? Why are we talking about this? Thank you so much for adding the Christian perspective, but also adding the secular perspective and how the secular world and the Christian world need to think alike, so that finances, because money is what makes the world go around in many senses. Thank you so much for bringing in hope. Thank you for reminding us all that there is Christ at the end, and Christ is the light at the end of this tunnel. Thank you so much for to all our panelists, and I'm tossing it over to my second coordinator, Prasansa, for the last bit.
Thank you, Bijoy, and thank you, everyone. So we have a poll. We have like few questions for you, and we would really appreciate to hear from you, your feedback. So I have it. I have shared it on the screen. I hope it's visible to you all.
It is.
Yes. Yeah, I'll be running it for a few minutes now, and then would really request everyone to go. To enter the poll. And also, yeah, thank you everyone for participating in this webinar. We appreciate your support to SACYN till the date. Especially, we are grateful to our panelists, Reverend Ramesh, Luchite, and Subeksha Timothy for such an insightful webinar. As someone who knows finances and economy, even from both practical and the Christian perspective. So thank you also to Bijoy for moderating the session so well, and Jian for supporting him throughout. Our next webinar is scheduled for 7th of November, same time. On that time, we will be focusing more on the topic of conflict, peace, and reconciliation. The first three webinars until today, we were focused more on COVID and its impact on different spheres of our lives. But from the next webinar, we will be focusing more on general topics that are pertinent to South Asian context. And that is what we as a network have been doing since 2002. So if you have any more questions or would like us to cover any more topic, please feel free to drop a message in our Gmail or Facebook. Do also visit our website for more information and updates. I will be leaving out our Gmail and website in the chat box. So we will wait for 1 more minute to wait for the participants to enter in the poll, and then we will end the webinar.
While you're waiting to end that, let me thank everyone for inviting me to be a panelist. It was a great pleasure. I hope I shared a Sri Lankan perspective to this whole discussion.
It's very good to have you here. It is very good to have you here because you're one country which is already in the realm of hope. So it is extremely extremely nice to hear that there is there is a at the end of this long dark period there is still hope. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Ramesh and everyone, Lochiting and Subeksha, and even all the participants.
Prasansa, you can stop the live feed.
Okay. Oh, hold on.